I'm Pastor Catherine Bowers at Evansburg United Methodist Church with your message for today. The message is about the story of Thomas as we find in the Gospel of John, chapter 20. Today's story opens up with the disciples all cooped up in a room. Have you been feeling cooped up? So have I. They are cooped up in a room and the door is locked because they are afraid. Jesus, their beloved leader, has been crucified. And who knows whether they will come for us next. Jesus had powerful enemies. Maybe they will come for us next. And so they are hiding out in a room together, and the doors are locked. Well, most of the disciples are hiding out. There's one disciple, when today's story happens, who isn't there. He happens to be out. Why he is out, we don't know. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just out. Maybe he went out for a loaf of bread at Wawa or something like that. It's Thomas. Thomas is out. And because he's out, he's going to miss the big thing that's about to happen. A wonderful, beautiful thing that's going to happen for these scared, cooped up disciples. And Thomas is going to miss it. Years ago, I served a church in Delaware County, and it was pretty close to the Phillies stadium. And so one night, it was a warm evening, beautiful day. My husband and I said, why don't we go to the game? And so we packed up the baby, and we got in the car, and we went to the game. And the Phillies weren't doing too well from the beginning. They were losing the game. And as the innings went on, it just got them farther and further behind, and we were getting tired about the 8th inning. The baby was getting tired, and so we said, okay, well, let's go before the rush, get out of the parking lot before everybody's trying to get out of the parking lot. So we got up, and we got out of the stadium, and we were walking in the parking lot. We were almost to our car when we heard a noise. And we turned around and looked at the stadium to see what the noise was. And it was a roar that got louder and louder as the fans just shouted and cheered, and thousands of people expressing their joy. And we hurried up and got in the car and put on the radio to see what happened. And here the Phillies batter had batted in 3 runners. And the Phillies went on to win the game, and we missed it. We missed it. We weren't there when it all happened. Did you ever feel like you have missed out on something? I'm kind of missing baseball right now. I wonder what the players are doing. They probably miss it too. Every year of your life, you get revved up for the season, and then one year you just don't. That must be strange. Thomas missed out. He just wasn't there. So finally, Thomas comes back in, and the disciples are excited. And guess what happened? You'll never believe this. Jesus was here. Jesus came in. The door was locked and everything, and he was here. And he blessed us, and he gave us his peace, and they're overjoyed. But Thomas, he just can't take it in. He just can't bring himself to believe this. He is hanging on to his reality. He knows what he knows, that Jesus was hung on a cross, that a sword was put through his side, that his hands were pierced. And he's not giving up on what he knows. Just doesn't believe that Jesus could be alive. Now, when you look at it, Thomas's doubts are reasonable. You don't have to be a 21st century person, post-Enlightenment, to know that this story is a little far-fetched. People knew what death was. When a person dies, they're gone. They don't get up again. That's how it works. But Thomas's friends are insisting, and he gets frustrated, and maybe they saw something or someone, but he's not convinced it was Jesus. So he throws down his conditions for believing. He knows that Jesus suffered on the cross. He knows he was pierced. And so Thomas sticks to his reality. He says, unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark in his side, I will not believe. Because of this, Thomas is remembered for all time as Doubting Thomas. He is held up as an example of a skeptic, of someone unwilling to have faith. Someone named Jennifer Hecht wrote a book a few years ago called The History of Doubt. This is what she said. Great believers and great doubters seem like opposites, but they are more similar to each other than the mass of relatively disinterested or acquiescent men and women. It might seem as though these two things, belief and doubt, live in a great rivalry, and yet the opposite is true. As is often said, faith is not the opposite of doubt. It is certainty. Certainty is the opposite of doubt, and certainty is also the opposite of faith. There is a difference between a doubter and a skeptic. Skeptics come from a philosophical tradition that questions everything we know and how we know it. And the point of skepticism is to remove all emotion and irrational feelings so that you can assess things objectively. A skeptic steps back from an apparent reality to question it. And skepticism is useful to us in many ways. It has enabled all sorts of scientific progress, the ability to question assumptions, to look for proof. This has helped us build up all kinds of knowledge, technology, medicine, and so on. On the other hand, there are some things that skepticism is not able to help us with. If you have a question like, am I lovable? Skepticism will not help you. Should I marry that person that I think I love? Skepticism will not help you with that. Am I really able to be the parent that this little precious baby needs? Skepticism will not help you with that question. I think we Americans have kind of a love-hate relationship with skeptics. We like it because we don't want to be made fools of. On the other hand, we know that in order to live life well, sometimes you have to ignore the voice of skepticism. Skeptics try to strip the emotion out of the equation and step outside of the problem. Doubters, on the other hand, are invested in what they have doubts about. They feel the emotions and the pain of all that is at stake when they doubt. And Thomas is invested in Jesus. He has followed him. He has been close to him. He has been friends with the disciples. There's a lot at stake for him in this question of whether Jesus is alive. Thomas's story is a gift to believers who struggle with doubts, which is all of us really, at some point or another. He's not a true skeptic. Thomas is a person who goes through a faith crisis. Well, as the story tells us, Jesus shows up again. This time when Thomas is there. And Jesus offers to oblige Thomas with all his demands. Put your finger, see my hands. Put your hand in my side here. Do not doubt, but believe. This is the same Jesus, by the way, who refused to prove himself or meet the demands of his enemies that he prove who he is, or turn water into wine for Herod. Jesus indulges Thomas, and he doesn't put him down for his doubts. Jesus just points something out. He says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." What a blessing it would have been, Thomas, if you could have believed your friends in the first place. You could have shared the joy with them sooner. That would have been a blessing. What I love about Thomas is even though he had doubts, he was still there. He was there with them. He didn't walk out the door and say, "You're all just crazy and I'm gone." He was there. He hung in there. When we learn about the rest of Thomas's life, we hear about an amazing apostle who traveled very far to witness to the gospel, by some traditions as far as India, and lived a life of amazing faithfulness. So I think instead of calling him Doubting Thomas, we should call him Faithful Thomas. We are like the Thomas in the story who has heard about the risen Jesus, but we haven't yet seen him in the flesh. How blessed it is for us when we believe. God bless those who care enough to doubt, and may they find the gift of faith. Amen.